I'd go to bed at night and I'd lay my head on the pillow and I just felt empty. It was like a SWAT team just kicked down this door in my heart that I didn't even know was there. This desire. So I had this desire to be espoused. Then all of a sudden this like, I want to be a dad, like woke up in my heart. I want to be a dad. And oh my gosh, I came back to the seminary. I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm going to be stamped into one of those celibate dudes who wears black all the time, who doesn't get to be a dad. Like, I'm not going to have my own family. So I wrestled with this. I wrestled so hard with this. And I would bring it to prayer, and I just felt like I ached and bled in every holy hour, and just every day was asking, like begging almost, like, please let me leave. I'm not a priest because I'm like moderately convinced of this stuff, you know? Like,
yeah.
I'm a priest because I'm utterly convinced of this stuff. I'm utterly convinced that life is better with Jesus.
Welcome to the Exposing Catholic Show, where we expose the lives, interactions, and stories of Catholics. Our guest today is Father Pat Schultz. Welcome on.
Thanks, guys. I'm stoked to be with you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for coming.
Absolutely. I wanted to start out with, obviously, vocation story. I want to give a little bit of background, who you are, and how that looked. So could you start early on and then kind of make your way to present day?
Yeah, gosh, there's various forms of the story that I could tell. So I'll just go into it, and we'll just see how long this goes. But
Okay.
Here's where I always started. So like I didn't grow up in a very faithful Catholic family, right? So my parents were products of their generation. So they got married. My dad was 28, my mom was 25. They were business owners. I came along 3 years into their marriage. I was born on my parents' third wedding anniversary, which was kind of cool. So I was born, and then, it's like, well, we got to get him baptized. Why? Well, because I guess we're Catholic. This is what we do, right? So like both grandmothers would have been upset if that didn't happen. So, baptized, first reconciliation, second grade, first communion, went through the PSR programs. But then my mom tells the story that in second grade, after like the whole PSR first communion preparation ended, it was like she was just done fighting with me going to PSR class. So I became a PSR dropout, right? So I was a PSR dropout in second grade, didn't go to Catholic school, and just had a very typical childhood. I have a younger brother who's 6 years younger than me. His name is Scott. He lives in Chicago now. But yeah, very typical childhood, played sports, was super involved in martial arts, did taekwondo, soccer, tennis, all those sorts of normal kid stuff, baseball in the summer. I was a good kid, had great grades. I was always a really involved, active, kind of straight A student. But then, so then fast forward to high school. So I had basically no formation whatsoever. We weren't going to church as a family. Like there was a period of time in my life where I definitely, when I was a little boy, I definitely thought that Mass only happened 2 times a year because we only went 2 times a year on Christmas and Easter.
Oh my God.
And it was just, it seriously was. We were your typical Christmas and Easter, your CEOs, your Christmas,
priesters?
your priesters. Yeah. I always make the joke that I'm like, we were the family who sat in like your pews at Christmas and Easter. Like we showed up and like, who are these people who are sitting in our pews? That's who we were. Yeah. So like very few memories of church as a kid. And let's see. So then fast forward to my junior year of high school. St. Mary's in Hudson was my home parish. Father Damien Ference, who you've had on the show, I think, right? So Father Damien Ference, his first and only parish assignment was my home parish. So my 4 years of high school were his 4 years at St. Mary's, which is just providential and so grace-filled and all that. And he was a huge influence on me. But junior year is when St. Mary's confirms their kids. So it's not like 8th grade. They did it junior year. I think they still do it junior year. Anyway, my mom had explained to me because, they send the paperwork home. This is a process you're going to go through. And I knew enough about it to know that like it would involve some classes. I knew I would have to go on a retreat, and like I wasn't antagonistic to it, but I wasn't, gung ho about it either. Like it was just like, okay, there's going to be some hoops I'll have to jump through, and we'll make grandma's happy, kind of a thing. So same time, junior year of high school, it's the fall. It's a few weeks before homecoming. And I was at Hudson High School, so I was public school all the way through. And my physics teacher at the time, his name was Mr. Golden. I think he still teaches at the high school, but he did a new seating chart. We got a new seating chart every month. You walk into the classroom, there was a stack of playing cards on this table, and you grab a playing card, and it corresponded to like this seating chart that was up on the overhead projector. So that's important because junior year is when I had, like, right around this time, I had this huge crush on this girl. Her name was Kristen. And I just was infatuated with Kristen. I thought she was beautiful and lovely, and I just thought she was great. And I wanted to ask her to homecoming, and then like wanted to ask her out, and then like marry me, basically. So anyway, Kristen was already sitting down in the classroom. She was already at her new seat. And I'm like, wouldn't it be sweet if like I got to sit next to Kristen, like your little like conversation mojo going on before I ask her to homecoming. And wouldn't you know it, I pick up the card and I got to sit right next to Kristen. It was like, this is awesome. So sit down next to Kristen, you know, the whole class goes by and no conversation happens. Right? So it was like super gun shy. Next day, same thing. And then I don't know, I wish I could remember it exactly, but I just know that we were working on something together. Either we were doing notes from the chapter together, or we were working on some worksheet together, but it was something having to do with the origin of the universe. And like Big Bang Theory, cosmology, stuff like that, which looking back in high school, it's like, how were juniors in high school dealing with, you know, astrophysics and cosmology? I don't know what I knew back then, but apparently we were working on something with that stuff. So in the midst of working on this, she out of the blue, like, started asking me questions about God, which like totally put me on my heels, because like at this point, like I said, I had no theological, philosophical, I had no religious background to have any understanding about who God is, what God is, any of those things. I mean, I wasn't an atheist. I might have said I was agnostic, like maybe he's there, but like has nothing to do with me, like in my life. I don't seem to be needing God. So like, I don't know. But here's the thing. So I wasn't stupid. I just was like, well, like, what do you think about God? And then she said some stuff, and I like repackaged her words and sent them back in her direction. And she's nodding like we're on, you know, the same page. And then she asked me this question. She goes, where do you go to church? And I said, very, you know, matter of fact, I go to St. Mary's. Which was technically true, right? And then she said, well, I've never seen you there. And I knew enough about probably what she meant. Like, I knew that there was the Life Teen Mass, which was the 5:30 p.m. Sunday Mass. And I figured that's probably what she meant. I've never seen you at the Life Teen Mass, which is true because I've never been. So this is my line. This is what I said to her. I was like, well, I'm a little bit more, you know, like I'm a little bit more serious in my faith. I prefer like the organ to like the guitars and the drums, you know? She's like, oh, all right. Yeah. Well, it's actually really cool. And she's like, in fact, tonight's the first planning meeting for the fall retreat. And she said, how about I pick you up and we go together? And I'm like, oh heck yeah. Yeah, let's do this. I found religion and my new wife, and it's all working out. This is a banner day for me. So she picks me up. I spent the whole rest of the day freaking out thinking, how am I going to, you know, carry on this lie, you know? It's not a good way to build your future marriage on this foundation of lies. So she picks me up. We go to this planning meeting. The youth minister at the time, he's still the youth minister, Ron Nowak, is giving some explanation about what the retreat's going to be about. Mind you, I have no idea what a retreat is. I have no idea any of the things that he's saying. Then he says we're going to go into a time of adoration. I didn't know what adoration was. During the Blessed Sacrament, I didn't know what the Blessed Sacrament was. So then all of a sudden, like, the lights started dimming down, and then Jeff Bodis, who's still the music minister there, he got up with his guitar and started strumming, you know, nice and quiet, the pre-worship kind of strum, and then like everyone's like getting up out of their pews and kind of surrounding the altar, and I'm like, what is this? What is about to happen? And then from the back of the church, I see someone walking forward with like this swinging smoke thing. I didn't know what a thurible was. I didn't know what incense was. So incense is processing in, and behind the thurifer is Father Damien he's wearing these long, crazy robes and this gold, shiny star thing in his hand, right? He was the monstrance. He's processing with the Blessed Sacrament, and he comes forward and he places the monstrance on the altar. And it was like, I had no categories to process what I was seeing, what was happening around me, what was happening in front of me. It was so outside of my experience at that time. But what I did witness, which was so life-changing, was seeing how all my peers, these people I'd grown up with, people I'd played sports with, you know, go to school with, they were like, they were responding to something that was just hidden from me, right? So some had their eyes closed, some had their eyes open, some were laying completely prostrate, some were singing. I mean, it was just like, what are they seeing that I'm not seeing?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where, like, in the part of the story where I'm always like, I don't know how else to explain this other than all I know is that within this moment, it was as if God had arranged all the chess pieces of my life through providence to bring me to this moment, because he wanted to step onto over the horizon of my world to introduce himself.
Mm-hmm.
All I know to say is that I was 16 years old and I met Jesus that night. Like, I'm looking at the Blessed Sacrament. I remember kneeling there and looking at this thing, and it just was a sheer grace of infused faith, really, of like looking at Jesus, thinking, and I this was the first prayer I ever really prayed, but just saying, God, I don't know what this is, but I'm pretty sure this is real, and whatever this is, I want more of it. And the night wrapped up, and I remember I felt like I left the church that night, that my life had been going in one particular trajectory, and just the course of my life was altered by 1 or 2 degrees, right? Seemingly imperceptible, but it was a new trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And it was after that I wanted to know what this was that I experienced. I got super involved with Bible studies. We had this weekly Bible study called Word Out. It was held at the home of these awesome adults, Beth and Kent Davis. Kent, he's now a permanent deacon in the diocese, but Beth was the first youth minister at St. Mary's when Life Teen started, and they hosted this weekly event, breaking open the Sunday scriptures. Like, I would go to this, and I was devouring theology books that she gave me. I was devouring content. I had these journals full of questions that I needed answers to, and I just threw myself into it, because it was this was how I would explain it. That so Catholicism, I was associated with Catholicism my whole life, right? It was like dragging around this clunky, cumbersome treasure chest that was just chained to my ankle, and it's like, it was just annoying, right? Mm-hmm. Every Christmas, every Easter, having to show up and be like, oh, I got to do the Catholic thing. But it was like these adults, they took the time to, like, can I show you what's in this treasure chest? And they were like opening it up to me, and like I was discovering a beauty and a tradition that made sense of my heart and my humanity, and it was this grand story that was cosmic and personal all at the same time, and I was just overwhelmed by it, right? So I just got drawn into the mystery as a 16-year-old. So at St. Mary's in Hudson, we had this incredible culture of vocations at the time, of so many young men just going to the seminary. So it was a very normal thing for people to ask really involved high school guys, like, have you thought about going to the seminary? You know, have you thought about priesthood? It was just like, hey, you go to Mass a lot, you probably should think about this, right? So people started asking me, and initially, like, the answer was like, no, I haven't thought about that. I don't want that. That sounds like I'd like to be happy, you know, like, what are you asking me to consider? And well, what ended up happening, there was a group of us guys who we were all kind of wrestling with the question together. And we would get together periodically, like Father Jeff Barnish, he's at the seminary now. He's one of the guys, we graduated high school together, but he was one of those guys that we would get together and talk about this question, talk about discernment, talk about the priesthood. And like, as hard as I tried, junior, senior, as hard as I tried to tell myself, like, no, I don't think I'm called to this. It was like the seed was planted too deep. The question was planted too deep, and I didn't have a shovel big enough to uproot the seed. It just started growing. And what was frustrating for me as a senior in high school was that all these other guys in this kind of conversation discernment group, a lot of them just got to this point of just saying, like, nah, I mean, I've thought about it, but I don't think it's for me. And I just could never get to that point. And so, you guys are getting the longer version, by the way, of the story right now. senior year, like you start applying for colleges, start thinking about your future. And I was too afraid to apply to the seminary. I met with the vocation director and I got an application, but it was like, I never even opened it because it was like there was like this spring-loaded Roman collar that was just gonna like grab me around the neck and drag me to a life of loneliness and misery. And like, I don't want to even look at this. So I made this bargain basically with God that I'm only going to apply to Catholic colleges, Catholic universities. And like, I'll get married and I'll make a ton of babies for the kingdom, Lord. And like, a lot of them could be priests and they can go to the, convents. And like, the church needs good laymen and good marriages. And that was like how I was going to plan out my happiness and my future. And so I had a full scholarship to the University of Dayton, went to Dayton. And here's what happened at Dayton. So I was a freshman there. And if you were to make a checklist of all the things you should have or accomplish as a, college freshman to be happy, like I had all of them, like straight A's, great relationships with professors. I was involved in campus ministry. I was involved in campus activities. I had a great group of friends. I wasn't partying. I wasn't being an idiot on the weekends. Like I was being virtuous. I was going to mass, all these things that you should do. Like by all standards, I should have been content and happy and flourishing. And I'd go to bed at night and I'd lay my head on the pillow and I just felt empty. Like, this is it? Like, how is this it? And, shorten this story a little bit, I got to a point where I determined that I just picked the wrong Catholic college. So I applied to transfer to Notre Dame that next fall and came back to my home parish's spring retreat that year. I was a freshman coming back to help out with it. And again, it was another moment of powerful encounter with the Lord in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament that just wrecked all my plans of just Jesus saying to me, because my heart at that point just felt so dead and lifeless and hopeless. And it was as if the Lord said, hey, how about, he did say, I felt like I heard this. He just said, how about we try this my way and don't be afraid. And it was from that point forward, I made the decision to go to the seminary, turned down Notre Dame that summer, went to the seminary, entered Borromeo the fall of 2008, convinced that I was going to I just need a year to get this out of my system. And then I can go back to, finding that Catholic wife that I'm looking for, and what I discovered when I got there was, this is incredible. Like, these men that I'm with are awesome dudes, and they're not weird. They're good men who are all pursuing holiness. They all love Jesus. Like I love Jesus, and they want to grow. They want to be better. They want to run after his heart. And I just fell in love more and more with the church. I fell more in love with Jesus. And after that first year, I'm like, I'm coming back. And then I just kept coming back, and I kept coming back. And there's a lot of other peaks and valleys along the way that, between then and May 21st, 2016, when I was ordained. But you slowly get to the point, just like like a dating relationship, you get to the point where you cross through this sort of invisible threshold where maybe you're aware of it, maybe you're not, but you realize, oh, I'm all in. Like all my chips are cashed. Like this is what I was made to do. This is how I am meant to lay my life down. Like, this is the bride for which I will give my life. This is the life that the Lord has intended for me. And, you get to the point where it's like, either they're going to kick me out or I'm going to be a priest, And so, yeah, I got to that point really like fourth theology, year 8 of 9, where it was like, oh, this is it. Like, I just can't imagine a deeper love, So yeah, then May 21st, 2016 is when the hands hit the head, the nose hit the marble, and that's it. So yeah, there was, like I said, a lot of peaks and valleys and hard points of the heart along the way, but that's how it happened. Like, he just broke in. I can't explain why he chose me, but he chose me for this. So there you go.
Yeah, that's incredible. Can we dive into some of those peaks and valleys in seminary life?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that the two biggest ones, well, I'll put it this way. So the college years were just years. So sophomore year, junior year, senior year, they were years of just falling in love with the intellectual tradition. I love philosophy. I loved grappling with the big questions. And I mean, it was a bit like, the analogy in my mind, it was a bit like going to med school, right? There's like out in the world, right, in the church, especially amongst peers, and, you know, seeing it in the, you know, that was like 2008 to 2011. So like Facebook is still big, Twitter's taken off, and YouTube is a few years old now. Just like, so you were able to be exposed to like the intellectual rot and the intellectual confusion that people are just finding themselves stuck in. And I part of why I love philosophy was it felt like having the ability to diagnose the problems, right? Like helping people to think clearly. It is such an issue in our culture today that young people, old people, middle-aged people just don't know how to think clearly. And so like I fell in love with philosophy. I fell in love with Christ as the truth. But what I had not yet begun to grapple with as, you know, a 21, 22-year-old young man was like the particular call of celibacy within, obviously, the call to the priesthood in the Latin church, that I discerned that this was a part of my own heart, how the Lord had made me to love in a celibate way, which is to say, not in an exclusive particular bride, but in a to receive the bride that Jesus has, right? The church, to love in this sort of general self-sacrificial way. I discerned that was part of my heart, but I had not yet really begun to grieve the loss of marriage and grieve the loss of fatherhood. So fast forward to the summer of 2011, one of my best friends from childhood, he and his high school sweetheart got married, and I got to be in their wedding. And it's still the only wedding I've ever been in as a, you know, in my life, because I mean, as a priest, you don't get to be a groomsman. You have a different role. But I'll never forget, you know, the whole day was so awesome. They were and still are an amazing couple. They're actually parishioners here, which is fun. But get to the part of the reception where they're having their first dance, and so it's Bob and Ellie. Bob loves when I tell this story because he loves when I talk about when he cries. He doesn't really. So, but this is what happened, right? So Ellie's she's beautiful in her dress, and the music starts playing. It's Andrew Peterson's song "Dancing in the Minefields" that they chose for their first dance, and she's like just escorts Bob by the hand out onto the dance floor, and he's this big dude, and she just is looking at him with such. It just was a piercing beauty, the love with which she was gazing upon her now husband, like my friend. And you can just see just these tears just rolling down Bob's cheeks, and she's just looking at him and just wiping these tears from beneath his eyes. And I remember standing there and being overwhelmed by the beauty of it, but just so pierced by this sudden realization of, if I keep going, if I keep doing this, like I will never have, no one will ever look at me like that. Like I'm giving up the right to have a bride, basically, right? I'm sacrificing particular spousal love. And it just awoke this deep longing in me to be espoused, right? Like this nascent, latent longing that was in me, like I want to be espoused. And it just ached, right? It just ached. So then that next January, right? So I'm in first theology. So that wedding was in the summer. That next January. So
you'd been in the seminary for like 5 years at that point?
So at that point, so I'd done 3 years of undergrad. This was the summer between undergrad and grad school.
Okay,
right? So that was going into first theology. Then when I was in first theology, so I'm in my fourth year.
Oh, okay.
The seminary went to DC for the Right to Life March. And it was the first time I went to the Right to Life March. This was the other thing that happened that knocked down a door in my heart that we did as part of that whole experience with the seminary. We went to, the Sisters of Life had this exhibit that they put on, this sort of walking audio tour where you would listen to these, you had all these big images of these different people, and you had this, like going through like a museum, you plug in the number and you can listen to the person tell their story. And stood in front of this image of this guy who was telling this story of him and his high school sweetheart. They were dating in college at this point. And she tells him, she informs him by a phone call, hey, listen, I just took a pregnancy test and it's positive. And as the guy's telling the story, mind you, I have no idea who this guy is, like no clue. He tells the story. He said that I responded terribly. Like I just basically said, you have to take care of that. That's going to mess everything up. We can't do this. And then he just cut her out. Didn't respond to phone calls or texts, just completely, stonewalled her. And that was like for like 2 weeks, he said. And he's like, I just was wrestling with it so much. And I went to the campus chapel, and I felt this deep peace come over me where I felt like I'm a dad. I'm going to be a dad. I think we can do this. So he's like, I ran out of the chapel, called my girlfriend, apologized profusely, like said, I think we can do this. I think we can do this. And he goes, and she just said, I had the abortion. And like, again, like I have no idea who these people are, but hearing that in that moment, it was like a SWAT team just kicked down this door in my heart of that I didn't even know was there. This desire. So I had this desire to be espoused. Then all of a sudden this like, I want to be a dad, like woke up in my heart. I want to be a dad. And oh my gosh, I came back to the seminary. I'm like, what am I doing here? Like this is like, I'm on this conveyor belt of formation. If I stay in this place, like I'm going to be stamped into one of those celibate dudes who wears black all the time, who doesn't get to be a dad. Like I'm not going to have my own family. Like what am I doing here? But at the same time, I didn't feel like I was called. I didn't feel like Jesus was saying, yeah, I want you to leave. I just did not know. I couldn't see how priesthood was ever going to really engage these desires for spousal love and these desires for fatherhood. Like I couldn't imagine it. So I wrestled with this. I wrestled so hard with this. And I would bring it to prayer, and I just felt like I ached and bled in every holy hour, and just every day was asking, like begging almost, like, please let me leave, and I just never got that answer, and I stayed. And then like, again, making a lot, like, I mean, we're condensing years here, but I went to this summer program in the summer of 2013 in Omaha, Nebraska, the campus of Creighton University. It's called the Institute for Priestly Formation. And that was the beginning of this, like opening up this vision of priesthood where it is a spousal paternal reality, right? That the priest, when Jesus calls a man to priesthood, he's not asking him to white knuckle anything. He's not asking him to sacrifice the desires of his heart. Mm-hmm. He's actually inviting him to receive the bride that Jesus loves the most, and to participate in like generating spiritual life, to participate in the fatherhood of God, right? Like we sit here, what do you call me? What's my name?
Father Pat.
Father Pat, right? Like every kid in the school, every person I interact with, right? It's Father Pat, right? I wear a wedding band because I laid my life down for the bride. I laid my life down for the church, and like, of course it's a different reality than like what you two experience as married people, but it's a spousal reality. It is a real engagement in a man's heart, in his desires to be espoused and to be a father. It's real. Like you feed your children, you protect your children, you teach your children, mm-hmm. you lay your life down for them, right? All of these mystical spiritual realities, they are real. Like, and if what we believe is true about, the Catholic faith, then the spiritual is more real than the natural, right? The natural is a sign of the spiritual, right? So like your spousal relationship is a sign of Christ's relationship to the church, mm-hmm. which I'm embodying as a celibate, right? Your fatherhood, God willing, one day, right? Like, I mean, do you guys have kids? I don't even know. Do you have kids?
No, not yet.
Okay. So when you have kids, right? God willing, right? Your natural fatherhood will be a sign of the kind of fatherhood that I experience as a priest. It's like, dang, that's wild. And I mean, so journeying through and navigating those aches and longings, I think for me was a huge part of the story. And it's a huge part of how I feel Jesus invites me to live his priesthood in the Church of Cleveland today. So it's wild. It's wild and it's real. So feel free to chime in anytime. I feel like I'm just like a fire hydrant at you guys right now.
No, it's like
We've got something special for all our Catholic organizations. Now, before you skip past this part, it's not an ad. It's more like an incredible opportunity to take your digital presence to the next level. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. Something only for our podcast listeners. We, DM Productions, have a 2-day Catholic social media makeover course. It's an online course specifically made for Catholic organizations. It will take your social media to the next level. And we make it easier than ever with our step-by-step video walkthroughs, cheat sheets, customizable templates, and more. Catholic organizations, let's start creating the quality and results that secular businesses have, but with the depth and beauty of Catholicism. Oh, and did I mention the price? $700. But remember I said I was going to let you in on a little secret? Use code DMPodcast to get it completely free. No credit card required. Just pop that code in and you're all set. Head over to www.dm.productions/social media makeover or click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
crazy. I just love hearing about all that stuff and how it's a deep yearning and aching, but you're fulfilled. Like God's like, I got you. You don't have to worry about it.
It's
I'm not just going to leave you high and dry. I'm going to take care of it, and you're going to be even more fulfilled than you even thought you could be.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's totally true. That's the God of abundance that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. It is just incredible to be able to hear that you have such a strong desire towards being a father, and at the time you were looking at it as a, like husband-wife type of father, and like I can't have that if I'm a priest. Like, that's just gone. It's stripped away. It's taken away, and I like the thing about you're saying he's not calling you to white knuckle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And can we focus on that a little bit? Like, what does that even look like? Because I feel like in today's society where sex, porn, masturbation, everything is so, I gotta have this now, I can't control myself.
Yeah.
How is God calling the celibate, the priest to not actually white knuckle it, but to give it up?
Yeah. So my great hero is St. John Paul the Great. And I've spent the better part of going on almost 20 years now, but like studying his great teaching, the Theology of the Body, his Wednesday general audiences. But Theology of the Body is so much more than just, it's so much more than like a Catholic chastity talk, right? Like George Weigel, who is John Paul II's great biographer, he said that Theology of the Body is like a theological time bomb that's set to go off sometime in the middle of the 21st century. And when it does, it's going to affect every aspect of church life. That it's just amazing to me that, in the 20th century, this is like a long runway getting to your answer, right? Getting to your question. In the 20th century, which was like one of the most brutal, bloody, inhuman centuries of human history, right? It's like it was Europe's attempted suicide. It was really what it was, right? It was complete, like, annihilation of what it means to be human, right? Mountains of corpses, rivers of blood, ideological tyranny, just all based on forgetting what it means to be human, right? From that century, and actually from Poland, the Lord raised up this man who was an intellectual genius, a philosophical genius, a theological genius, an artist and a poet, who was so in love with love that he began to articulate a vision, like an antidote to the sexual revolution and the chaos that was unleashed upon the world. Like hell just opened up and spewed chaos. And like we're still living in the aftermath of the sexual revolution, right? Several generations on. But Karol Wojtyła, John Paul II, he gave us the antidote, right? He cast this vision of like, what does it mean to be human? What is the meaning of our embodiment? What's the meaning of our sexuality? What is the meaning of the sexual act? What does it have to do with Jesus? What does it have to do with the church? Like everything is the answer, right? The Catechism says the entire Christian life bears the mark of the spousal love of Christ in the church. Mm-hmm. Like the entire thing,
That's
everything,
crazy.
like everything is stamped with the DNA of Jesus, right? Like the bridegroom. Like it's this whole conspiracy of love. The whole thing is a grand cosmic love story. It's this rescue mission. It's this love story, all of those things. So one of those things that John Paul II would say to the world, to critics who were like, okay, this vision in particular, when it comes to chastity, they're like, this is too lofty. Modern men and women can't live this. Like lower it down, lower the bar. And he would say, what man are we talking about? Like, are we talking about man dominated by concupiscence? Or are we talking about man redeemed by Christ? Then he would thunder in his like great Polish, and he would pound his fist. He'd say, do not drain the cross of its power to redeem. Don't drain the cross of its power to redeem. That the cross, like Christ crucified and risen in glory, like Jesus truly can enter so deeply into the human heart that it's a real transformation of the person from within, a transformation, a healing of our desires, a reorientation of our whole humanity to what is true, good, and beautiful, right? Like that's what the radical demands that Jesus gives in the gospel when he says things like, you heard it said that you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you, whoever looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Like, oh my, like you hear that and you're like, well, crap. Like it feels like, because it feels as though Jesus is saying, you thought it was hard before. Like, let me just ratchet it up 100 degrees and, throw that high bar, 10 stories high. It feels as though it's impossible what he's demanding. But he did not come to make the law, to make the law harder. He came to give us the power to fulfill the law's radical demands, right? It was St. Augustine who said, the law was given that grace might be sought. And grace was given by Christ that the law might be fulfilled, right? Mm-hmm. So back to your question, that when the Lord calls a man, so like we got all those dudes up in Wycliffe right now studying for the priesthood, right? All those seminarians. Shout out to the seminarians, right? We need more seminarians. We need more guys in the seminary, because the church can't exist without priests. Anyway. So those guys who are discerning this call right now, if the Lord is calling them to priesthood, he's not saying, all right, I just need you to just, like, here's the law, right? Celibacy as this no to sexual intimacy, no to marriage, no to family. He's not saying, I just need you to fulfill this law and just somehow figure out how to do it. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of previous generations of priesthood, I think that was kind of the messaging that they got, right? Like, just figure out how to cope. Now, Jesus is saying, like, if you let me draw real close to your heart, if you let me draw real close to your desires, if you let me in deeply, right? Like deep vulnerability to my heart, to my mercy, to my grace. If you draw close to my Blessed Mother, like we actually can engage these parts of your heart so that you can see that, like, all of those desires that you have as a man to give yourself away, right? Like all of that passion and love that for in the married vocation goes to a bride, like all of that can get sublimated, right? The word sublimate means lifted to the sublime, right? It can be elevated and aimed at loving the bride, loving the church. And additionally, like like those desires to be like, I mean, just the reality of like a 25-year-old guy, like there's sexual desire there, right? Like, yeah, millions of years of evolution in the brain telling a man, like, try and get something pregnant around you is really what like a man's brainstem is saying when, between the ages of 20 and 25. Like, it's not as though like Jesus is saying, shut that down. It's okay. Can we integrate your sexual desire within the whole of your humanity so that like the whole of your humanity can become a life-giving gift to the bride, right? So think about within marriage, like the husband and wife, through their vows, they say, I'm laying my life down for you, and I'm gonna give myself to you, right? That vow becomes very concrete in the sexual act, right? It becomes very particular, very concrete in the sexual act. Within celibacy, that concrete particularity gets spread out over the whole of the man's life, over his whole being. Like, my whole being is meant to be a gift, a life-giving gift, a sacrificial life-giving gift to the bride. That it's not like, it's not a genital gift. It's the gift of my whole humanity, my exhausted at the end of the day humanity. But it's back to John Paul II. It's like, let the cross enter deep to integrate your humanity, to integrate your sexual desires, to integrate and heal wounds and past addictions, to let it all come together so that your whole person can be a gift given, to generate divine life in the heart of the bride. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, it's not white knuckling. It requires a lot of interior work and spiritual direction and prayer and honesty and vulnerability, but man, it is worth it. Mm-hmm. It is worth it.
Yeah.
I love the thing of like, can't you just make it easier?
Yeah.
I feel like so many people relate and they're just like, come on, it needs to be easier. I can't do that. And then to be able to realize that, yeah, of course you can't.
Yeah.
But then with the grace,
totally,
and to seek that grace, to let that into your heart, you can then achieve it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's like, and also just getting hyped up talking to you because you're a good speaker and you got energy and you're like, come on, don't you feel it?
Yeah, man, I love this stuff. It's my life. It's true. It's real. It's the coolest job in the world. It seriously is. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to touch on kind of landing the plane on becoming a priest. What did those final, year, maybe couple months or weeks leading up to ordination look like, and how were you feeling during that?
Dang, yeah. Beautiful. It's such a good question. I'll share this story. So before diaconate ordination, before priesthood ordination, the church asks the ordinandi, the guys being ordained, to go on a retreat. So going into getting ready for diaconate ordination, that retreat, so diaconate ordination is when you make your promise of celibacy for the sake of the kingdom, right? So that big promise comes then. It doesn't come at the priesthood ordination. You've already made your promise of celibacy at diaconate. So in some ways that's like, feels big, right? Mm-hmm. You make that promise and that's it, right? That's it. So there was that ordination carries a lot of gravitas, and I was thinking all about it, and I was ready to make it, but of course there's all like the natural human things of like, oh my gosh, this is it, right? You probably felt something like that leading up to your wedding, like, this is it. Like, I want to say yes, but oh my gosh, am I really going to say yes? Right? But so on that diaconate ordination, I had this profound experience in prayer, and I'm not going to call it like a mystical vision. I'm just going to say, like, the Lord brought me in prayer to, effectively, I was visiting the home that I would have had, standing in the foyer of the home that I would have had I been married. And I was surrounded by the kids that I would have had I been married. And I was saying goodbye to the wife that I would have had I been married. I'm standing at the door, and I know I have to leave. And like, as I'm getting ready to leave, like, one of these kids in this, again, this is in my spirit, in my mind's eye, in my heart, in my prayer, however you want to say it. One of these little boys, like, stops me as I'm about to walk out the door, and he runs up and he wraps his arms around my legs, and he says, I get down like nose to nose level, and he just says, I would have been so proud for you to have been my dad. And then he goes, but you gotta go. I stand up, I walk through the door and just hearing the door, I can still hear it right now, that like door hinges that really needed some WD-40, this creaking slow, and hearing it latch closed. And then the scene shifted, and I was celebrating Mass, and it was this odd looking altar, and like the top of it was normal, but like what I suddenly became aware of is that underneath the altar, like it was as if all of the columns were made out of the family that I gave up. Like they were holding up this altar. And I just felt the Lord saying, like, the altar of your priesthood is built upon the family that you gave up. That I call you away from a particular bride to be of service to the entire bride. I call you away from a particular family to serve all families. I call you away from having your own children to be father to everybody. So like that grace was was, I mean, to say consoling just doesn't do it justice. There just aren't words for it. But leading up to priesthood ordination, there's just like a wedding, there's so many practical like elements and details you got to work through, and you know, you do cake tasting, food tasting, like, you know, getting the venue ready for a party, and ordinations or invitations going out. So you got all that natural level happening. And thank God for my parents who were so awesome during that time. Shout out to Rick and Michelle. But then, yeah, it was just so much excitement. It was so much excitement. And, it was just overwhelming getting to that day, not in a heavy way, but just like I was a 5 gallon bucket, and there was hundreds of gallons of beauty and love being dumped in. It felt like every minute. It just was a saturation point of support, a saturation point of like feeling in my bones Jesus saying, it was not you who chose me, it was I who chose you. Like, why? Why? Just immense gratitude. Yeah. Immense gratitude.
I'm not gonna lie, that got me emotional. It was so crazy. Just like hearing the, I don't know if you'd call it like a vision, but just how you described that. Just, I can see it in my mind.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if you can do that, but just I can picture everything happening.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I forgot you were even talking about a vision. I was like, wow, that's really that's crazy.
Who's this woman? It was a vision. 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 Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. Was there anything? So we've heard this actually from a few people, is that the priestly ordination, most people ask about that and think that that's the biggest deal. But since you already did the deacon ordination,
yeah,
it's like 1 year apart is not as much deal.
When I was ordained, so they changed it, the protocol now, but when I was ordained, it was 6 months. So I was ordained in October of 2015, ordained May 2016. So I was a transitional deacon for 6 months. That's how it used to be for many, many, many years. So now it's a full year of diaconate before ordination. So, yeah.
Were there any big moments leading up to priestly ordination?
I mean, finding out your first assignment, that stuff is huge. Like wrapping up your time at the seminary is so weird and huge. Like the place you've lived in I was there for 8 years, and you know, like it's almost like, you know, the end of like a show that you love, like watching the finale of The Office, where you're like, that's it, right? Like, that's just it. It's done. You know, like the last day, like my room was completely emptied out, and like took my nameplate off the door and turned in my keys, walked out. I'm like, what is happening? Like, it's just so, you just, because all those years you're looking ahead to those dates and you see all these guys getting ordained ahead of you. You're like, it's just like, surely the second coming will happen before it's my turn, like, but then you're like, oh my gosh, it's now. It was just wild. Yeah. That was some big stuff. That our priesthood retreat together with all the guys was a great experience. It felt like this joint bachelor party together, like we were all the groom, we were all the best men, it was just so cool being together for those 5 days before ordination. Yeah, it was cool. It was a wild month, really, before ordination. Cried the whole way driving to the cathedral that morning. I'm like, I'm going to get in a car accident driving to the cathedral. Yeah.
You didn't though.
No, I did not.
Okay,
no,
but
good, I thought I would. Yeah. Yeah.
And then can we talk about first Mass?
Yeah, sure.
Look like?
Oh, that was awesome. So my first Mass was May 22nd, 2016. It was the Solemnity. It was Trinity Sunday. At St. Mary Hudson, the Life Teen Mass. And so St. Mary's, I was the fourth of our 7 consecutive first Masses in 7 years. So we had 7 guys ordained in 7 consecutive years at St. Mary's. I was the middle child, the middle of the 7. And so like, you just can't believe you're celebrating your first Mass, and like the church was packed to the gills, standing room only. People were parking across the street at Western Reserve Academy, and they were being shuttled over to the church. And I mean, like all these other seminarians serving. There was, it was like 30 something concelebrating priests. It was just surreal. And it's like everybody I love is right here. Like they're all right here. Like it was just so crazy. Everybody from all these different walks of my life, they're all right here for this moment. One of the coolest moments of the whole thing for me was, back to that summer of 2013 when I was in Nebraska for that summer program. While I was there, that summer, my mom was part of this women's Bible study, this study called Endow, Education on the Nature and Dignity of Women. It was a Theology of the Body, JP2 study. And during that, she became friends with this young mom at St. Mary's at the time. Her name is Lauren Laboda. And Lauren, her and her husband, they already had 2 kids, Faustina and Augie, they were probably like 3.5 and 1.5 at the time. And Lauren was expecting twins, which is a lot, right? You got 2 littles at home and twins are showing up. And she was put on bed rest for like, I think the last 6 or 7 weeks of her pregnancy. And that was just really hard for her. So her and my mom had struck up this friendship, and Lauren was talking about how hard all this was. And my mom was like, well, Patrick, I mean, he's not really doing much. He has plenty of time to pray for you. So Lauren and I started texting and just really struck up this friendship. And like the Lord moved in her and Mark's heart to, when I got home from the summer program. So this summer program, I'm like really getting in touch with spousal desires, spiritual fatherhood stuff. I come home and they asked me to be one of the twins' godfathers, which was wild, right? Wild. I mean, I was so overwhelmed by this. The twins were born on June 30th. These tiny little nugs, these 2, Rosie and Lily. I'm sure I got a picture of them somewhere up here. That one up there, that's me with Rosie when I had her first birthday. Anyway, so Rosie and Lily, they were almost 3 at my first Mass, and they brought up the gifts. They brought up the gifts, the bread and wine. And what was so wild about that, so I've been, I was sharing how I've been wrestling with, like, Lord, how will you ever satisfy these desires of my heart? And the Lord spoke into it. And one of the things that he spoke into it, he said, one of the lines that he said, it was during one holy hour at the seminary. I furiously wrote it all down. One of the things he said was, you will never have a little princess who will steal your heart and wrap you around her little finger, but you will spend the rest of your life introducing countless souls to the Prince of Peace who sacrificed all for them. And like, it's like, yeah, that's true. But the day that first Mass, they're processing forward, bringing up the gifts of bread and wine, and I like wasn't thinking about that journal entry at all. I just was thinking about, this moment. Hope they don't trip. Hope they don't freak out and get scared because there's all these people around them. There's their whole family walking up with them. But as Rosie and Lily are walking up, these two little princesses who have totally stolen my heart, who had totally wrapped me around their fingers, who had just completely transformed my life and put flesh to my understanding and desires for spiritual fatherhood, like as they're walking up, the Lord just like, as clear as I'm speaking to you, just said like behind my ear, like, I gave you two, right? Instead of, it wasn't, you'll never have a little princess who will steal your heart, wrap you around it. He just says, I gave you two. And like, here they come. And I just like lost it, right? Like I picked both of them up. There's these great pictures of me like holding both these little girls. And it was so beautiful. But yeah, it was surreal to say those words of consecration for the first time. And, it was just awesome. It was awesome in the truest sense of that word. Awesome. Yeah.
Do you have any other godchildren?
Yeah, I do. I've got 6.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. Rosie, Matthew, Xavier, Zelly, Casey, and Felix.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all kids of my friends. Xavier is Bob and Ellie's third. Yeah. I love being a godfather. Zelly is, that's Zelly up there as a little one. She's much bigger now. She's got a little brother. Yeah. It's the best. It's absolutely the best.
What is like the role of a godfather do as a priest?
Well,
is it different
for
than, like...
this godfather? I pray for my godchildren every day by name, offer them to the Father. I intercede for them all day long. One of the images that I have is okay, so this is a silly image. This maybe you guys don't. Do you know what do you remember what N64 was? That first game system that was like 3D. Okay, the coolest game on N64 was GoldenEye. Okay, I never was allowed to have a game system growing up. My dad never let me have one, but my friends had these game systems. And one of the coolest parts of GoldenEye was the proxy mines, that you would throw these proxy mines out, right? So they were like time delayed, or someone would walk by and they would blow up. But okay, so I have this image of like interceding for my godchildren. Like I'm throwing these proxy mines of prayers into their future, right? So like, interceding for, so like Felix was just born, it's like 2 or 3 weeks old at this point, right? So like praying for the day that like the first time like one of his siblings steals toys from him, right? And like his heart's just like, like he can't understand that. Or like praying for like Casey's first day of school, or praying for Matthew's first communion. They're like just like throwing these grace bombs into their future, so that like grace is waiting for them already when they get to all these different moments. So like that's part of how I intercede for them, is just throwing grace into their future. And like just for me, I just most of my day off is spent hanging with these friends and holding their babies and playing with their kids and hanging out with these friends. And yeah, that's the best. There's nothing better than taking a nap with a baby. That's just my favorite thing in the world. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It wasn't a weird picture. I pictured it in my mind. I was like, oh, that's really, really sweet. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I do.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You're talking a lot about fatherhood and masculinity. I want to talk about culture and society has started to really, really go away from these strong masculine men. How do we, and how do people of the church, how do they stay rooted in what the church teaches about a strong masculine leader and the man that God's calling them to be?
Yeah, that's a darn good question. Okay. I think we need like a good definition of like what authentic masculinity is to start, right? So, I would put it this way, that authentic masculinity is the convergence of, or the coming together of, strength and power along with tenderness and weakness. Like if one or both of these are missing, you don't have a real man. And the reason I say that is the real man is Jesus, right? Jesus reveals authentic masculinity, right? Pontius Pilate is the first evangelist, right? Who both proclaimed the gospel, behold the King of the Jews, and he also presented Jesus to the world and said, Ecce homo, behold the man, right? He is the man. And when we gaze upon Jesus, what we see is two things. We see this man who is at every moment vulnerable before the heart of his Father, like receiving everything from his Father, right? This wild open posture of receptivity, right? He doesn't have a closed heart. He has a absurdly open heart, like this risky, crazy open heart, like receiving everything from the Father. And at the same time, he is always giving himself away, right? We see in Jesus the man who gazes upon like Jairus's daughter and like who has died, and he looks at her and he holds her by the hand and says, Talitha koum, little girl, I say to you, arise, right? That Jesus is the same one who strides into the temple area and says, you have made my Father's house a den of thieves, a house of robbers. And he flips over the tables. It's a heart that both recognizes that is just straddling the worlds of tenderness and softness and just dripping love and compassion, and at the same time is ferocious, right? He's Aslan from the Chronicles of Narnia, right? He's not safe, but he's good, right? All of those things. He's the Christ who came to effect this mighty exorcism within the world. Now is the judgment of the world. Now is the ruler of this world cast out, right? He strides into the synagogue at Capernaum and confronts the demonic forces. And he looks at the woman caught in adultery, says, where are your accusers? I don't condemn you, right? And like restores this woman's dignity and looks at her with so much love. Authentic masculinity, it is bringing together both of those worlds. And within the church, one of the things that I've seen over the past many years is this real desire, this real resurgence of trying to recapture the heart of men, different programs for men, whether it's the King's Men or That Man Is You. And one of the things that I've seen is this overemphasis on the man as protector, provider, an emphasis on the spiritual warfare, spiritual battle aspect, which speaks deeply into the masculine heart. Like, I get it, right? Like men, like I've got a sword in my office, right? Like, I get it. My favorite movies, Braveheart, Gladiator, Hacksaw Ridge, Lord of the Rings, like, I get that, right? But the thing about all of those movies, right? Think about William Wallace and Braveheart. Have you seen Braveheart?
I've seen parts of it. It's too gory for me.
Okay, have you seen Braveheart?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't ask me to quote any lines.
I'm not going to ask you to quote any lines, but man, if you had not seen Braveheart, we'd have had a problem. Stop, cut the cameras, we're done. Okay. At the end of the movie, this is the line that's just so good. They fought like warrior poets. That's masculinity, to fight like a warrior poet, right? You've got the warrior and the lover, the power with the weakness, the ferocity with the tenderness. And a lot of these men's programs in the church, they just so focus on the warrior to the exclusion of the poet, so to speak. The masculine heart, it will only flourish in the measure that it learns to receive deeply the love of Jesus. Like, I know we're so attracted to spiritual warfare. I know we're so attracted to the battle. Like, most men are just saying, like, I'm ready to be a soldier for Christ. I'm ready to be like, just tell me my marching orders. And Jesus is looking at you saying, hey, I already fought the battle. I fought the battle. I need you to receive my love so that you can be the man that I'm calling you to be, right? Like, in heaven, there's no battle. In heaven, it's a wedding feast. And like what men have to start learning to do now is to wage war upon their selfishness, their egoism, their pride, to wage war upon these false images of masculinity that are so culturally demonic, and this sense of machismo and like, you know, this exclusion of all of the affect, like just getting rid of all of the poet side of the masculine heart. Like men have to, like the real battle is for like their hearts. Like, yeah, you want to fight a battle. Good. Fight a battle. Fight it interiorly. Go to war against yourself. Go to war against your selfishness. Go to war against your sin and your pride. Like, go to war against all those things that keep you from receiving the love of Jesus, that keep you alienated from communion, that keep you from love. Go to war against that. Like, be the warrior poet. Be the lover, right? Like John Paul II, man, there was not a more masculine man of the 20th century than John Paul II. That dude he took down communism. He suffered assassination attempts. The dude was a towering man, and he wept and he loved and he was tender and vulnerable. Like, men have to learn that vulnerability is not a liability. It's the secret sauce to flourishing. It's the secret sauce to becoming an authentic man. We have to learn that vulnerability is not a liability, but it is the key ingredient to be a disciple, to be a husband, to be a father, to be a friend. Shoot, you can't have, like, there is no love without vulnerability. Like, we're here to learn how to love. We're here to become love. And we're in many ways raising a generation. We have many generations of boys who've been raised to like, we've inculcated this allergy to vulnerability, which is why, I mean, how many masculine events, churchy events with men, like, it's like men's group with there's always alcohol. There's almost always alcohol. There's almost always like sports or something like that, because men don't know just how to be with men, right? Like, just don't know how to be. So let's just, have a little social lubricant to make everyone a little bit less awkward, and let's all just stare at the same thing in front of us and pretend like we're having fellowship. Yes. Like, no, we have to learn vulnerability. And that takes time, and that takes trust, and that takes, like, someone has to go there first. Like, vulnerability begets vulnerability, right? That's why Jesus did it first, right? On the cross. He became the utterly vulnerable one to entice us, to show us, like, it's safe. Like, the water's okay. You can come here too. Yeah.
One of my favorite things you just said there was fighting the battle in yourself.
Yeah.
Because one of the big pieces of advice that I got when we started our relationship was, you're the man, you need to set up the boundaries. You need to start being proactive to this and not getting caught up in some sort of thing that you are then going to have to try to fix later on. Like, start communicating and expressing these things. And the one line he said was, whenever you talk to guys, you talk to them about protecting the woman.
Yeah. And
they always could raise their hand. You ask them the question, okay, what are you protecting her from? And shoot up hands, and they're like, oh, yeah, if there's a guy coming, there's some animals, whatever. And he's like, no. First, you have to protect her from yourself. And then you can protect her from all those other things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's spot on. That's spot on. Spot on.
And also, like, as the woman in the situation, that's just so attractive to me. It's like, oh, like, that's the protector that I'm looking for. Like, yeah, it would be nice if you, like, fought a bear or whatever, but I don't need that. Like, it's, the chances of that happening are slim to none. But, like, what we're going to be dealing with every single day is, like, each other and like the stuff that you have in your heart. If it's a war going on with yourself every single day, like, that's terrible, to be able to deal with that. And protecting from from that is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it's just a great thing. It's so obvious, but like nobody knows about it. It's kind of crazy because it's so obvious that you're like, oh no, that's good. And like that part's good. I got to protect her from all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You guys do a phenomenal job at social media, whether
thanks.
it's the podcast that you do, where I think is all your homilies, or do you also do additional episodes to the homilies?
So the podcast is called Slaking Thirst, and the word slake. So it comes from a few different places. It comes from a quote from the Catechism, Pope Benedict. But the word slake means to quench, to satisfy.
Mm-hmm.
And so me and Father Ryan Mann, who I think you guys have interviewed, he's the pastor of St. Basil's in Brecksville, St. Basil the Great. Years ago, mutual friend of ours just kept saying, like, guys, like you've got to start a podcast. Like you got to put your stuff out there. And both of he and I were like, I don't know about that. And as Father Ryan said, he's like, it's just going to be a bunch of homeschooling moms and like 10 kids listening to this podcast, if we do this. So we relented, and this buddy of ours, he set it up for us back in 2018, I think. Got all the background stuff on SoundCloud going, and anyway, yeah. So like for a few years now, the podcast is like we just upload. It's basically people eavesdropping in on the ministry that we're doing, right? Like it's listening to homilies that we give, talks that we give, teachings, retreats, parish missions, things like that. And that kind of, when I came to Sacred Heart, I was able to hire a digital ministry guy, and he kind of helped take over all of that. So he built up our YouTube social media presence, and also was managing the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I just think the social media and your presence, like that guy coming to you and Father Ryan Mann, obviously, if you two are in a room, it's just so much energy. And it just makes sense. It's like, come on, that's captivating. You want to watch that. Like, who wouldn't want to watch that thing? Yeah. Even just sitting here now, I could just tell. It's like, wow, those two in a room got to be crazy.
That's pretty fun.
And I love watching the different clips on social media, like Instagram Reels, and seeing how you talk specifically super impactful. And you don't, it's not like I don't know, there's going back to the man thing and masculinity, it's like a power punch, but then there's also this great love that I can feel where it's like, okay, you didn't hit me in the face, but you hit me in the heart. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
A good line.
That's a good line. That's high praise. That's the desired outcome. That's the desired outcome. Yeah. Yeah, man. Here's what I mean, I don't know how to be another way. I'll just start with that. And like, I'm not a priest because I'm like moderately convinced of this stuff, like,
yeah.
I'm a priest because I'm utterly convinced of this stuff. I'm utterly convinced that life is better with Jesus. And I'm utterly convinced that we have the greatest story to tell. We've got the greatest news to share. We've got the most beautiful tradition, the smartest tradition that Catholicism holds out to us, the most beautiful and brilliant way to be human. And we've got a lot of people who are in bondage. And I just think about, yeah, there's a lot of people who listen to the podcast and listen to homilies and things like that. But, for my parishioners, the exposure that they have to my heart as their father, for most of them, it's for that hour and 15 minutes on Sunday when they come to Mass. And it's like, I want every Mass, like every homily to be a life-changing. I don't want to ever preach just a mere, like, it's good enough. Like, granted, there are some weekends where I'm like, I don't know how that went, but like, I want to be soaked in sweat and exhausted and totally poured out, because it's like, I don't know if I'll have another chance with this person or these people. Like, every Mass is like the last Mass. It's like, I don't know how else to be. Like, I think all of this is so cool and so exciting and so amazing and so yeah, like there's nothing about our faith that's just meh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I feel this urgency to try and communicate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely shows with the passion and the way that you're doing it. I love it. Let's talk about social media. And
Yeah, sure.
What is your take on that? I feel like Catholic churches, organizations, businesses are slowly starting to see that value in doing that, meeting people where they're at. I think that's actually the biggest thing, is that you need to meet people where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can't stay there. They should be coming to church and celebrating the sacraments. But where are they at right now?
Yeah. Yeah, we have to be there. We have to be in that place. I mean, that's what Bishop Barron says. He's just like, we can't seed the ground. You know, like we have to be like where the people are, right? That's why St. Paul went to the Areopagus when he went to Athens. He went to, I mean, it's Mars Hill. He went to the court of the philosophers. He went to where people were talking and exchanging ideas. It's like, well, the Areopagus now it's a digital platform. Like we have to go where people are talking, and we're like, we have to be there. We have to go there with everything that we have and use the means that we have available to us to present the gospel. Right? Like woe to us if we don't preach the gospel in every way possible, right? I mean, like St. Paul made use of the Roman roads in his day. Like that was modern technology. You know, he made use of the Roman roads. The letter system, like he was able to utilize that. You know, every technological development the church has integrated herself within in order to exploit it for the purposes of sharing the gospel, like for the sake of the one, you know, like it's always for the sake of the one lost sheep, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just so routinely amazed at the reach of these homilies that Father Ryan and I preach, and the emails and the letters that we get from around literally the world. And it freaks me out sometimes when Dan shares the numbers and things like that. He's our digital guy, but like we were just beneath the million downloads last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's so many. That is so many people. It's just like, yeah, it's just freaky. It's just totally freaky. But like, you know, I pray a holy hour, get a homily together, go in the church, preach a daily mass homily. There's, 100 people in the church, and then within an hour, it's got like 10,000 downloads. It's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
What? And like the people who share like how like it's changed their life, it's saved their marriage, it's brought them out of depression. It's like, it's just unbelievable. Like, it's just so humbling and terrifying like all at the same time. But yeah, I mean, back to your question though, like as a church, we have to, I feel like we have an obligation to make use of every means possible to proclaim the gospel for the sake of the one that might hear it. And as you said too, like Dom, like the idea can't be that this would ever substitute for, or would ever be enough. It's never enough, right? Like it's hopefully it's formative and inspiring and helps people in their own prayer life and their own journey. But it's ultimately meant to hook people and draw people into the real presence of the incarnate God who's waiting for them at their closest Catholic church near to them,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we have to be where the people are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was this, I don't know, some priest that's on Instagram, but he said people would ask, well, I watched like the online live streams of Mass, and it's the same thing, right? And he's like, well, I watched the Super Bowl, on TV, but
Yeah.
that's the same thing as being there in person, right? And they're like, heck no.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of similar in that way of, you grab them there and then they get interested, and then going there in person is like a whole nother level of it that you're never going to get just being online.
Yeah. The whole online mass thing, I think in hindsight, of course, is 2020. Nobody went to mass online. Nobody did, because you can't go to mass online, right? It's like saying I made love over FaceTime with my wife. No, you didn't. You might have done something else, but you certainly were not making love to your spouse over FaceTime. You can't, right? Like, and that's what the mass is. It's the mystical union of Christ the bridegroom with his church the bride, and real presence really matters, right? I mean, anybody who's in love knows this, right? Like, do you want a long distance relationship? Do you prefer that? No, right? Like, what's better, FaceTiming or like being face to face? Obviously, being face to face, right? Like, FaceTime is great and fine for a period of time. You're on a business trip, but like, you come home from the business trip and you're like embraced and hugged and kissed and like, it's so good to be with you. That's the mass. Nobody went to mass online. People watched pixels on a screen, and they said prayers, and then prayers are always efficacious, but nobody went to mass online. Yeah.
One of the things I like the most about the Catholic Church is this integration of kind of like everything. It's got the smells and the interactions, and you're involved and participating in all the stuff that's happening.
Heck yeah.
Can you touch on that?
Yeah, I've often said and thought that the Catholic faith is the most sensual faith. It's the most sensual religion. Every aspect of the human person, right? So you have to have like correct anthropology, right? So we are both body and soul. We are integrated body and soul. We are spiritualized bodies. My soul is not in my body. I am a body, right? Like, the human person is different than angels. We're different species. So because we have these bodies, we take the world in through our bodies. We take in we take in information and experiences through our senses. And so, like, the Catholic faith, as Father Damien has always wanted to say, is that in the Catholic faith, matter matters, right? The stuff of the faith matters. All the sacraments they're not these intellectual acts. They are physical, tangible, stuffy things. Why? Because the God of the universe became flesh, right? The Word was made flesh. And that is, like, by many orders of magnitude, the most astounding claim that's ever been made by human beings and taken seriously by human beings. Because, like, what? You mean, like, the God who hung the stars, the God who banged out the Big Bang, the God who inscribed the cosmos with the laws of thermodynamics and nuclear fusion and the strong nuclear force and entropy, like, that God was a fetus? Yeah. He was. He took on matter. He had a body, and in through that body, he interacted with humanity. Like, he touched us. He grabbed us by the hand. He waded into the waters of the Jordan. He made the muddy spit clay saliva and rubbed it in the blind guy's eyes, right? Like, it's this sensual interaction. And the incarnate Christ, who after his ascension, like, he did not just like disappear and now we've got this disincarnate Christ and we just have to like vaguely remember his presence. No, like, he continues to interact with the physicality of our humanity through the physicality of the sacraments, right? So it was St. Leo the Great who said, what was present in our Lord has passed over into his mysteries. Mysteries in the Greek, mysterion, is translated as sacramentum, which means sacraments. Like, the interactions of Jesus in his life now in the church extends to us through the sacraments. Like, he still literally touches us. He still literally like takes us by the hand and heals us, like all of those things. And like within the Catholic faith, we stand, we sit, we kneel, we process, we listen, we see, we taste, we touch, we smell, we hear. Like we are bombarded. Like it's meant to be a full sensual experience. Because that's the incarnation. Like he touched all of our humanity. That's why the Mass is meant to be. I mean, you look at the great cathedrals of Europe, like they are so beautiful. Like the intuition of the faith from the beginning of the church is that beauty is not a luxury, but a necessity. That beauty is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Because how else are we going to express, make visible, tangible, perceptible, like the beauty of the incarnate God? Like he hides himself in the Eucharist. It's this hidden mystery. How am I supposed to know that if it weren't for like the obscene amount of beauty that we surround it with? Like none of the beauty of our churches, think of the great cathedrals of Europe, St. Peter's Basilica, Notre Dame. Like it's not necessary, right? We don't need, St. Peter's doesn't need to be gilded like it's gilded. It doesn't need the amount of marble for it to function, but it's fitting because of what happens there. And one of the tragedies of the American architectural, liturgical architecture, especially since the, post-Vatican II, Saint Suburbia, like we got in the mindset of, designing our churches according to modern building codes and doing things the most efficient way. You look at like, so I had a parishioner who just went to Germany. She went to the cathedral in Cologne. It took centuries to make. Like looking at that thing, the last thing you think is, that was probably the most efficient way they could have built that building. Like, no, it's actually the opposite. Like, that was probably the most inefficient way to build a building. Let's make it as beautiful as possible. I would love the conversion of our liturgical architects. This liturgical conversion to really take hold of the heart of the church, to really grasp that concept that beauty is not a luxury, that it's fitting and necessary to reveal the mystery, because we have the most beautiful story. We've got the most beautiful thing out there. It's Jesus.
Yeah, I remember you saying like this one cathedral took, I don't know how many years to be built, but it existed longer. It took I don't know.
It took longer to build than it has existed now?
No. What was it? The Protestant church.
Yeah, it took longer to build than the Protestant Reformation has been around.
Sorry, I completely
that's right.
messed
like the
that
Duomo
up.
in Milan, 700
But it's
years
crazy.
to build that thing. 700 years to build the Duomo in Milan. Like,
yeah.
They don't even know how many statues are on the outside of this thing. It's like uncountable. Like, not efficient, but necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Great question. So, launching sometime around Easter. This might be the first time I get to announce this.
Oh,
yeah. Slakingthirst.com, coming to an internet browser near you. Slakingthirst.com. So we're going to be migrating the YouTube presence and merging together the podcast, and it will all be on slakingthirst.com. And part of the great benefit of doing this is we're going to be able to have easily searchable categories of stuff, because right now we just have thousands of episodes that are they're just basically unsearchable, not categorized in any or tagged in any way. So we'll have tagged episodes. You'll be able to search, parish missions or men's ministry, women's ministry, talks about masculinity, apologetics, RCIA stuff. So it'll all be organized in a nice way on slakinthirst.com. There'll be both the audio and YouTube stuff. So check that out. For now, the Sacred Heart of Jesus YouTube channel is a great place to go, or any podcast provider, any podcast platform, Slaking Thirsts, SLAKINGTHIRSTS, Slaking Thirsts.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere I think you can listen to podcasts, I think podcast is on there. So, or come visit me at Sacred Heart of Jesus Parish in Wadsworth for any of our Sunday masses. So,
there you go. Yeah, that's awesome. This should be dropping around Easter. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect timing.
Great. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was great.